I've only told a few close friends about this, and they didn't believe me. But I know it really happened to me, and I have no way to prove it. It was one of those brutal Chicago nights, where the cold bites harder than you'd expect. The wind screamed through the cracks in the old glass doors of the 7-Eleven, carrying with it a damp chill that settled deep into my bones. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered erratically, their low hum blending with the faint buzz of the coffee machine in the corner. Shadows stretched and twisted across the shelves, dancing as if alive. Outside, the fog clung to the ground, thick and unsettling, shrouding the empty streets like a warning. The store was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of the old building settling. Business was slow, as it always was at that hour, and I had resorted to mindless tasks to keep myself busy. I restocked candy bars, straightened rows of canned soup, and refilled the coffee machine. But no matter how hard I tried to distract myself, I couldn't shake the strange, nagging sensation that something wasn't right. It started subtly. A faint tapping sound echoed from the back room, soft, almost rhythmic. At first, I thought it was the ice machine acting up again, but when I checked, everything was in order. I laughed it off nervously, muttering to myself about how tired I was. But as I turned back toward the counter, I could have sworn I felt a gust of cold air brush past me. There was no one there. I told myself it was nothing, probably just the drafty old building or the chill of the night getting to me. But then, as I began wiping the counter, the bell above the door jingled sharply, cutting through the silence like a knife. My head snapped up, and that's when I saw him. He stood in the doorway, dripping from head to toe. Water pooled beneath his feet, forming dark, irregular puddles on the tile floor. His jacket hung heavily on his shoulders, soaked through, and his jeans clung to his legs in an unnatural way, almost like a second skin. His shoes squelched as he took a step forward, and in his hand, he held a paper bag. It was so what it looked ready to dissolve, yet somehow it stayed intact. I opened my mouth to greet him, but the words caught in my throat. It wasn't just his appearance that unsettled me. It was his eyes. They didn't meet mine. Instead, they darted around the store in quick, jerky movements, as if he were searching for something or someone. Can I help you? I managed to ask, my voice faltering. He didn't respond. He just stood there for a moment, his gaze landing briefly on the coffee machine, then the shelves, and finally on me. There was something in the way he looked at me, something hollow, like he wasn't really seeing me. As he stepped further into the store, the sound of his wet shoes echoed in the empty space, each step sending a shiver down my spine. I glanced at the puddles forming behind him, darker than they should have been, as if the water wasn't entirely water. I gripped the edge of the counter, forcing myself to stay calm. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a regular customer. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. Can I help you? My voice came out uneven, trembling despite my attempt to sound casual. He didn't answer. Instead, he shuffled slowly toward the back of the store, the wet squelch of his shoes echoing unervingly in the quiet. I couldn't take my eyes off him. His movements were deliberate, almost mechanical, as if he were being guided by some invisible force. He stopped in front of the fridge doors, opened one, and pulled out a bottle of water. Water? He was soaked to the bone, dripping puddles wherever he stood, yet he chose water. The absurdity of it made my stomach twist. He walked back to the counter, silent as ever, and placed the bottle and the soggy bag in front of me. The bag looked ready to fall apart from the moisture, its edges dark and mushy. "That's not for sale," I said, gesturing toward the bag. My voice barely carried the weight of authority, and I knew it. He didn't react. No explanation, no acknowledgement, just a blank stare. Slowly, he slid a crumpled $20 bill across the counter. I hesitated for a moment, but decided it was better to get this over with. I rang up the water, bagged it, and handed him his change. That's when I felt it. His hand brushed mine, and the shock of its coldness froze me in place. It wasn't just cold. It was icy, like he had been submerged in freezing water for hours. I flinched, my breath catching in my throat. For the first time, he looked directly at me. His eyes were dark, hollow, and searching. His lips parted slightly, like he was about to say something, but no words came. Instead, he turned abruptly and left, his wet footprints smearing across the floor as he disappeared into the foggy night. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. As I looked back at the counter, my stomach dropped. The bag was still there. It sat in front of me, damp and fragile, like it was waiting for me to open it. My better judgment told me to leave it alone, but curiosity clawed at me. Hesitantly, I reached for it, peeling back the soaked paper. Inside was an old, rusted watch. Its glass face was cracked, and its metal body was tarnished, but the hands were spinning wildly, faster than any clock I'd ever seen. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at it, unable to look away. It wasn't just the speed, it was the sense that it wasn't marking time, but something else entirely. I shoved the watch back into the bag, my hands trembling. The lights above me flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that seemed to crawl across the walls. I stood there, frozen, as a low hum filled the air, growing louder and louder until silence. I glanced around the empty store, every hair on my body standing on end. The bag sat there, taunting me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. And in that moment, I realized the worst part. He wasn't just a customer. Whatever he was, he had left something behind. And it wasn't just the bag. The cold hit me like a wave the moment the door clicked shut behind him, as if he had taken the warmth with him. The store felt wrong, heavier somehow. My breath formed pale clouds in the air, and the fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, casting jittery, uneven shadows across the floor. I locked the front door with shaking hands and flipped the close sign, trying to convince myself that I was in control. But as I turned around, I froze. Wet footprints stretched across the floor, leading back toward the fridges. I was sure they hadn't been there before. Impossible. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe I had missed them in my panic, or maybe I swallowed hard and took a cautious step forward. The air seemed thicker now, my footsteps muffled as if the store itself were holding its breath. The trail ended abruptly in front of the same fridge he had opened. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, the bottle of water was back on the shelf. I felt my stomach churn, my body locked between fight and flight. I knew I hadn't touched the fridge. He had taken the bottle. So how was it there now, sitting perfectly upright, its condensation glistening under the flickering light? That's when I heard it, the tapping sound. Faint at first, like fingers drumming on glass. My pulse quickened, the noise growing louder and more deliberate, like it wanted me to notice. It wasn't coming from the back room this time. It was closer, behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, expecting to see him standing there. Or worse, something else. But there was nothing but rows of empty shelves and the dull hum of the lights. The tapping stopped. I grabbed my phone, desperate for some kind of lifeline, and dialed my manager's number. The line didn't connect. No signal. I tried again and again, but each time the screen blinked back at me, taunting me with its silence. I glanced back at the counter, my eyes drawn to the soggy bag I had left there. It hadn't moved, but now it seemed different. Heavier, darker, as if it were alive. My hands trembled as I debated what to do. Throw it away? Burn it? But I couldn't bring myself to touch it again. The silence in the store grew oppressive, broken only by the faint sound of my breathing and the distant hum of a world I was no longer sure I belonged to. I don't know what I expected when I locked the door that night. Maybe I thought shutting out the world would keep whatever was happening outside. But now I realize it wasn't him I needed to lock out. It was the thing he left behind. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, staring at that bag. The silence in the store felt like it was closing in on me, heavy and suffocating. My breath was shallow, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. A part of me thought, just leave it, leave everything and run. But my legs wouldn't move. I stayed rooted to the spot, staring at the bag as if it might do something. I couldn't shake the feeling that the air around me had changed, growing colder and thicker, like I was being surrounded by something unseen. Finally, something inside me snapped. I grabbed my jacket and my keys, leaving the cash drawer unlocked and the lights still buzzing. I didn't even glance at the bag again. I couldn't. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock before bursting into the freezing night air. My car felt like a sanctuary. Even though my hands were trembling so badly, I could barely grip the steering wheel. The engine groaned as I started it, and for a brief, horrifying moment, I thought it wouldn't turn over. But then it roared to life, and I sped off, leaving the store behind. The watch, I left it. Whatever was happening, whatever that man had brought with him, I wanted no part of it. I didn't care about the mess I was leaving for the next shift. I just needed to get as far away as possible. But now, I'm not sure that distance has made a difference. Every night since then, I've heard it. That same fade tapping sound, just like in the store. At first, I thought I was imagining it, just my nerves playing tricks on me. But then it grew louder. Some nights, it's barely audible, a soft, rhythmic knock that seems to come from the walls. Other times, it's so loud it jolts me awake, sending chills down my spine. I've tried everything, checking the locks, leaving lights on, even sleeping with music playing, but nothing drowns out that sound. I haven't been back to the store. I don't think I can. I keep replaying that night in my head, trying to make sense of it. Was it just my imagination? Or was there something wrong about that man? Something not human? The way he moved, the way he stared, the way the air seemed to shift around him. I can't explain it. If you've ever experienced anything like this, please let me know in the comments. Because right now, I don't know what to believe anymore. And this was one of our followers' stories. If you want your story to be told by us as well, leave it in the comments below this video. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, we prepared the next video especially for you. Click here to watch it.